Hey everyone, Graham here from therecordingrevolution.com. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Got a little quick tip for you if you're ever recording drums in your home studio and you ever use a mono room mic. I do this often, mostly because of preference. Maybe it's an input limitation. Maybe you've got 7 mics on your drums and you've only got one more input on your interface and you still want to have a room mic for your drums to kind of capture the live energy. So you only have one mic to use for a room sound as opposed to maybe a stereo room sound. This is pretty common. A lot of times I'm using just one extra mic to capture a little bit of the room. And you still get the vibe, you still get the energy and the air that a room mic affords. But in the mix, it doesn't sound like the kit is in a nice, big, spacious room because you don't have sort of the stereo perception of how big the room is. You just have sort of the length of the reverb on the room mic. And so sometimes you still want that big drum room sound, and if you run all your drum mics through a reverb plugin, it doesn't quite do that. I really find this little trick is very helpful in creating a sense of space if there wasn't one anywhere. And so here's a great example of drums that were recorded with a mono overhead and a mono room mic. So the whole kit is very mono. So it's very phase coherent and punchy and clear, no phase problems, but it's not very wide. So take a listen to it as it is. There's a little bit of reverb on the snare drum that I've bussed out to a reverb, but that's it, and it doesn't sound very wide or very spacey. Then I'll flip on a plugin and you'll hear the difference as the drums go from mono to stereo. Flip it on. Off. On. Right, big difference, big change. Just more of a stylistic decision. One's not better than the other. And again, don't get confused. What we're not doing is sending all the drums through a reverb, okay? There's already some reverb on the drums here. The snare has a sending a little bit of the snare to a reverb, which is over here. Okay, it's a stereo reverb. It's a large plate. Also, the whole drum bus is going a little bit with a send to that same large plate reverb. So you're hearing that reverb here. And if you listen closely in headphones, you can tell that it is sort of a stereo reverb. You can hear the tail. But this is very different. Okay, what are we doing here? We're taking a mono room mic that we were left with and putting a stereo reverb on the mono room mic. Take off the group here. Here is the room mic completely raw. Let me get rid of this reverb here. Right? And then a lot of times what I like to do is compress the snot out of it. Very cool sound, very aggressive. Still doesn't change the width of it, right? So what I did was put a reverb on the mono room mic. Now in Pro Tools you can do a mono to stereo reverb. So you're on a mono track, but if it's a stereo plugin, it can force it into stereo mode. So it runs it through the plugin and pops out stereo. And in this case, I took the room setting, a medium room, played around with sort of the high frequency cut, and it's completely wet. So that means that what you're going to hear after this plugin is the room mic completely doused in reverb. You're not going to blend some of the wet signal with the mono signal. I want it to be completely stereo and completely wet. So here's what happens when you turn it on. So the room mic went away from the center to now being completely stereo on the sides. Okay, maybe not better, maybe not worse, sort of stylistic decision. Okay? When I bypass it, you'll hear it get back into the center. Okay, very different sound. So it takes what was originally there and it goes in a completely different direction. There's some things I like about it, some things I don't. I brought back some EQ and some compression on top of that. But you can hear what we're doing. We're creating a fake scenario where it's almost like you had two mics thrown up at the back of a big live room. So you kind of have a nice stereo, very wide rendering of the drum performance. It sounds distant. It sounds kind of muffled. It sounds like two room mics far away. And that's where you would play with the settings on the reverb itself till it sounds about right tonally for you and space-wise and decay-wise. I'm using a reverb, an EQ, excuse me, to roll off a lot of the unnecessary low end and some of the highs because the cymbals get a little more present when I squeeze the snot out of them with the 1176 after the fact. Okay, so you go from this to this. Now that by itself is pretty darn ugly. I don't really want anybody to hear that, but what I'm doing is trying to use these plugins to create a fake stereo room vibe that I can then pull up underneath the mix and give the mix some width on the drums. So if we bring back just the drums again and take out the room mic. You hear how small that is. I mean, this is close mic'd, small room, no ambience. And so the room mic, which gave it a little bit more ambience because it was further away, now we can create some stereo studio width. There you have it, using a stereo reverb to turn a mono room mic into a nice wide stereo pair of room mics. If you already have stereo room mics on your kit, but they're just not big enough, they're not deep enough, they don't sound like you were in a nice big live room in a studio, because let's face it, most of us are in our living rooms, dining rooms, or basements, then you can still use this trick to enhance your room mics, give it more space, then filter out the frequencies that get weird that you don't like with an EQ afterwards, and then blend that in with some heavy compression on it. Blend that into your closer mics on the drums and the overheads, and you can enhance the room feel. And that's so much of a good drum sound, is that room feel, that room vibe that's blended in with a close mic. So experiment with that. Go ahead and put that reverb right on the track. You're totally changing the tone. That's the whole point. You're not trying to blend in some reverb. You're trying to completely just get the room mic through a reverb, so you're just hearing the tail. Hope that helps. Again, this is Graham from therecordingrevolution.com. Have a great week. Make some great music. I'll see you soon.